South African institutions of higher learning are constant battlegrounds at the start of the academic calendar. Long-standing issues of corruption and maladministration have seen students take to the streets yearly, leading to countrywide protests across universities, delaying the start of the academic year. Good evening and welcome to Unfiltered. I'm your host, Sizwe Mpofu Walsh. Tonight on Unfiltered we ask, what will it take to fix NSFAS? Let's welcome our guests, spokesperson for NSFAS, Slumezi Skosana, and from the South African Union of Students, Tato Maseko. Mr. Skosana, can we start with you? What's behind the delay in disbursements to students that is still taking place in terms of them actually being able to access the funds that are due to them?
The main reason, Sizwe, has been the integration of data between NSFAS and the relevant institutions. In the main being that NSFAS sought to authenticate and verify information, based on old, forensic reports relating to, potential creation of ghosts and so on. So when NSFAS embarked on a program of direct payments, it sought to address that, to make sure that when a disbursement is made, it is made to a living being, to a warm body. So that led to a situation where there was a need for a regular data exchange between these institutions and NSFAS. And in those processes, there were delays because, as you may expect, in the academic year, you would have a student dropping out, God forbid, passing on, or sometimes changing modules and so on. So I think we could have taken, for granted that the process was going to be seamless, but at the time of implementation, it had, those hurdles where the administrative capacities of various institutions came into play. Others were quick, to work. Others, took time to adjust. And the unfortunate and unintended consequence was the effect on the students.
Why was there not enough testing of the system?
Well, as you may have seen, from reports, you only sometimes discover these things, with hindsight. The reports, for example, from Werkman's attorneys, led by Advocate Ngugai Toby, revealed that there wasn't a proper feasibility study done, prior to the implementation of, the initiative. And we realized that there isn't something wrong with the initiative because it sought to address all those things that people had raised in the past. But the implementation could have been better if there was proper feasibility and proper testing, which I accede was not done.
Mr. Masekwa, your thoughts on the lack of disbursements which went late into the academic year in 2023 and your response to NSFAS's explanation?
Look, it's really saddening and disheartening to find out and to learn that, of course, experienced students not having money for about 7 months, going to exams from somewhere May 2023 till November, December. That means they went to write exams, prepared their last test, wrote exams. Ultimately, that pushes them to a failure because when you don't have money for food and basics, you ultimately fail, which is of course a problem because NSFAS has got that N+1 rule. It then means that you will ultimately fail, then become defunded while you are a deserving student, at a problem that, of course, NSFAS has caused. Now, with the explanation given that speaks about them not testing their systems, if this is not deliberate, because at some point it feels deliberate, it looks deliberate, that they would intentionally not disperse funds for allowances for students so that they fail, so that there is more money to do other things. Because the money that is at NSFAS is supposed to help and assist the poor and the working class children who are the most dependent on the scheme. This is the highest bursary that funds almost a lot of students across institutions in the country. And when there are glitches that they realize, maybe they should have reversed it when they realized that they were not thoroughly prepared for that particular, change within the sector, because it has caused a lot of disturbances. And of course, now when you understand that you're about to start the new academic year with these given problems that have happened in the previous years,
right.
because if you check in the previous years, you would also realize that every year in the beginning, we have got problems that were not addressed from the previous academic year,
Indeed.
which we'll anticipate to have as the year goes.
Indeed. Let me put some of what you've said to Mr. Skosana, because there's this view now that this is becoming deliberate. What do you say to that? Is this maladministration may be too strong, but is this a mistake on your part, or are there actually attempts to decrease the number of students so that you don't have to fund more students?
Sizwe, it can be true that we are intentional in delaying this, as I prefaced earlier, to say that we're doing the best, to make sure that these students are catered for, because we are very, very clear about the class, that we are dealing with. It's people from poor and indigent backgrounds. And we can really not risk being intentional in starving kids, or rather students, on campuses. Because Tato correctly pointed out that it's got a ripple effect, of somebody not meeting the progression requirement to move to the next level, which would then lead to a gap year, because NSFAS does not fund a course twice. If you fail it, we don't fund it. You have to seek alternative funding. Once you've passed it and moved to the next one, that's when we fund.
Indeed.
Yes.
Can I just ask on that, what's the scale of, towards the end of the 2023 year, the number of students who are still waiting for the disbursements around the end of that year?
It was, what was written about in the media, which was not accurate, was around 70,000. Yeah. But internally, because we knew that we are dealing with exceptions, not necessarily like the big bulk, of the students, it was around 20,000.
Is that what you're seeing, the 20,000 number?
So from our end, it's about 70, because almost every institution cries about the students not receiving funding, and it has taken a lot of time. But you see, the problem cannot be the number. Be that as it may is 20,000, be that as it may is 70,000, this is a huge problem. And it being a huge problem is precipitated by the mere fact that if therefore you know that you've got, let's say they know they've got 20,000 students that they did not fund for the 7 months, will they then create an exception for them that they become funded for the following year so that they can then perform? Because they are admitting that they've got 20,000. We say we've got approximately 70. But if they say the 20, can they then admit that those 20 that they know, they must deliberately give them funding, provided that they did not academically perform because they did not have all that is required for a student to academically do well?
Let's go to a break. We'll come back to these questions after that, but we'll also come to questions of the running and administration of NSFAS and some of the recent reports which have cast a shadow over that process. Stick with us on Unfiltered. We'll be back after the break. Welcome back to Unfiltered. We're talking NSFAS. Mr. Skosana, we spoke in 2023 at the beginning of that year, and we spoke about the SIU report into NSFAS. Can you give us any update on that report and where we are with the process of that report?
Well, I think Much of the massive corrective action that the board has taken has mainly emanated, from those reports where we were, a finger was pointed at us that we were paying for undeserving students, and that in some cases we have over-dispersed to institutions and so on. That is why I think we were in a way tempted, to bite off more than we could chew in terms of the corrective actions that we have taken. I'm here talking about our student-centered model, which sought to say, as pillar number one, let us have digitization and automation of processes so that decisions can be reached quicker and faster, for the benefit of the applicants. And then secondly, that we should look at the issue of student accommodation, because we have seen that as we go around the country, regardless of the assurances that are given by institutions, some students are staying in under conditions that are less than conducive for somebody to study.
And I do want to come to those questions and the strategy in due course, but just on this question of the administration. Okay. No, absolutely.
Sure.
Mr. Masekwa, what's your view as SARS of the way that the administration and the health of the administration of NSFAS is, and do you believe that the accusations of maladministration, even corruption, have weight to them?
Look, the report has indicated that there are problems there. And from where we stand, our view is that the law must take its course. And the problem is that the oversight of the board, the ministry on its own, is not as effective as one would anticipate that they would. And of course, the slowness to take corrective actions around many other things within the NSFAS, it's of course a point of concern.
Why do you say the ministry hasn't been fast enough? Because
you see, is when they get a report, they will slackish. Let's take for an example the report about the transition that happened in the previous academic year from direct payments and stuff. The reports indicate that they did not do sufficient testing and stuff, but they still proceeded with that for the entire academic year. You see, if there is decisiveness within the sector that spoke to that, when you realize that you will therefore run a potential of starving more students, you then halt and take an action that is going to ensure that the sector becomes healthy and more people, more students, needy students are assisted. But when you continuously, amidst the reports that suggest otherwise, then it suggests that you are slackish to take decisions that are decisive in the best interest of those who are in need at the time.
What about these allegations of, I think it was something like 40,000 students that received funds that weren't actually due to them? I take it SAUS doesn't condone the action of
the student
effectively misrepresenting to NSFAS, and what can be done about that problem?
No, we are in support. I think there are institutions that with the SIU, they had taken the money back because we believe that the people that must be assisted, are the ones that must receive the money. So if at the time you are not in need, there is a person who's in need that is deliberately disadvantaged. And of course, the law must take its course. And we don't agree that people must go and misrepresent themselves and in fact take a position of someone who's rightfully deserving. That is wrong of students, those that have done that, and of course corrective measures must be taken in the record.
Mr. Skosana, where are we with the recovery of those funds? Because it was found that there was a lot of money spent on students who didn't necessarily qualify. To simplify, have you been able to decisively get that money back yet?
Not yet. It's a very tricky setup,
Sure.
Sizwe, because then it brings forth, issues of ethics, morals, and all other things. Because look, the students may have misrepresented, their information in order to access funding, but what did they use the money for? It was for education. Don't you need education in this country?
Sure.
You get drawn into that sort of, can I call it, emotional side of things, and say, do you spend time charging 40,000 people, taking them? You'll fill up the South African court system or something,
which is
like
already
that.
quite
Which
quite
is
full.
already overburdened. So that is being deliberated upon. But as NSFAS, what we have done in order to make sure that that situation does not recur, it is the new application process that we have put in place and recently just announced. That takes out the temptation, to falsify your information.
And to be fair to you, that new application system seems to be quite advanced to the extent that you just put in your ID number.
Correct.
And then you will take data from SARS, from SASA, from other places and verify it in the back end on its own. So the student doesn't have to do the verification.
He doesn't
of
have
the
to be
documents.
tempted to provide us with falsified information.
Are you confident that that system will work and has been adequately tested?
Whatever information, Sizwe, that you need, it's sitting somewhere. Because the cohort of students that we deal with don't fall from anywhere. They would have come from the DBE system, and somebody at Home Affairs would have recorded them. But of course, there are certain areas that do crop up, during this facing in of a new project, like the validations. Sometimes you send the ID, it cannot be validated anyway. So then those are the aberrations or the exceptions that we deal with as well that have already come up now.
Mr. Masekwa, this new system, are you confident that it will be an improvement?
Look, I think first let's speak on the application. Then I'll come to the to the system. We SAUS are very worried and concerned more about the late. In last year when they opened application, they opened them I think around November.
Right.
At last, that is a point of concern. Why is that the case? Because most of the students have finished with their exams, had finished with their exams at the time, and those that stay in deep rural areas which might need the NSFAS might have not, they're at home deep in Kangala or at Bochum, in Ramalboro, at a cornered place where they might not be network or access and etc. And I mean, the ones that will have this, resources to can do all of these things. At schools, there are computer labs that can assist some of these deserving students to apply for NSFAS.
When would you like to see the application cycle open?
At least around September.
Right.
August, September. That means students are still at school. Even the NSFAS guys can go to these high schools to engage them, to assist them to apply. That makes the system much easier. And so that in January, when everybody comes, they don't have, because when you realize there's going to be a lot, it has happened in the previous year, where there's a lot of people who are applying in the last minute and the system crash, because they always bite more than they can chew. So if then they have got a lot of time, then it means that at least we will have at least less number of students, because also there are student leaders in different campuses. After realizing you are not applied, they will be also trying to help you to apply. Now let's move to the next, to the system, the integrated system. We are happy about it because it also pushes away the idea that people will try to be clever around the system, because it then can get the most accurate system. But the problem that we have in as far as this processes are concerned is how accurate will it be that is not going to crash on us as time goes on. Because you see, when they first allow applications, there is a cohort that has got access. When they close out, that's when almost everyone will remember. Now people can apply without not having matric results. At the time, people will be having them, will be knowing that they're allowed to go to universities. There will be a lot of people who will then applying, and that is a potential crash of a system if it's not tested.
Let's put that to Mr. Skosana. We'll come back to you, Mr. Masekwa, but just it's this question again of, are you ready for a new system, but also a potential flood of applications on this new system? And do you feel that we will be okay when that flood arises?
I personally feel very comfortable, and of course, as NSFAS, we feel comfortable that we'll be able to deal effectively with the anticipated numbers. We have embarked also, I think, on a huge communications drive, because there are things that would assist and basically attenuate that flood that you're talking about. In us saying to students, don't wait for the 20th of January to get your results before you can apply, because that has been the case. People would sit back and say, you know what, I'm not sure if I'm going to make it to a tertiary. So they'll sit back, and then on the 20th of January, they have passed, they're excited, they now want to apply for NSFAS funding. And at that point, you'd remember NSFAS would not have been geared up, to deal expeditiously with the processing of these applications. Because in the past, our system, I must admit that it had weaknesses. In terms of the evaluation, it would evaluate one thing and leave the other. Then today, you are provisionally approved. The next day, something else is picked up that makes you not approved, and then it takes you back. So the major complaint of the applicants would be, I moved from stage 1, then to 3, when I was at stage 3. Now the status on my portal says that I'm back to stage 2 and so on.
And you feel that will be improved?
Yeah, so we have dealt with that. Once it starts moving from stage 1 to stage 2, it can't stop until you provide us with registration data of the institution where you have been admitted. Right.
And Mr. Masekwa, you wanted to go a bit deeper into the system.
Yeah. So in fact, I wanted to speak about what the ministry spoke about. You see, Mr. Sulumize accede that there will be exception where you'll put in your ID and it will somehow not be found. Now we speak about the communication system at NSFAS. That's a problem, really a problem. You can call them the whole day at a time and you don't get a response. You can send them SMS, DM on social media and still not get the responses. Then and it's of course a problem, because that means that you can do everything that you want to do, but still not, the only people who can literally walk and be assisted are the people who stay in Cape Town. Those are the only people, because the head office now are in Cape Town. They are nowhere in Limpopo, nowhere in KZN, nowhere in Mpumalanga. So the only people at this particular point who are privileged enough, who has a problem, who can walk into the office of NSFAS are the people in Cape Town.
Right.
While they know that the exception of this nature, that at the same time they know their communication system, their call center system is probably one of the weakest the country has ever had.
We're talking NSFAS and the higher education landscape, especially the funding of that landscape. Stick with us. We'll be back after the break. Welcome back to Unfiltered. We're talking the funding of South Africa's higher education landscape. Mr. Skosana, just on this question of NSFAS and its administration, Mr. Andile Nongogo was recently dismissed, and this was around this report into the administration of NSFAS, especially around his role in student financing. Should this make us worried about such a senior official who has been found to have undergone wrongdoing or been involved in wrongdoing?
I think given the background of the scheme and where we come from, I think the board should be applauded for having responded, to the call, by various whistleblowers that there was something not right, at NSFAS. And of course, the board does not have onboard expertise to do that. It had to bring in experts to help them see what could have happened. And once that report came out with recommendations and findings, I think the board should be commended for having, acted swiftly, on that.
Do you have any details you can share with us on the actual nature of the allegations? Because at the moment it's hard to know what the wrongdoing exactly was.
No, I can only stick to what has already been sufficiently covered in the media, that the major allegation was on the CEO being fingered, to have hand-picked companies that eventually got the contract to disperse allowances, and also some, I don't know how to describe it. I wish I were Charles Dickens. That these partners also behind the scene had, their own, arrangements as per the findings. So I think that was the major allegation. So it did not necessarily speak to the technical expertise or capacities of the appointed companies, but it spoke more to the irregularity that characterized their appointment.
Right, and Mr. Masekwa, what's your response to this? Because, I mean, this is quite serious. Such a senior official being involved in hand-picking, to use the words of the spokesperson, the allegations in the report that is. And then we have a problem with the disbursements. So it's not just the technical problems with the disbursements, but we've actually seen wrongdoing in the way that the companies who were selected.
Look, it's really worrying, and this is worrying. This is at the center of, NSFAS has been at the center of possible strikes at institutions of higher learning and disruption, of course, of the academic year across the board. A senior official, the accounting officer picking up companies to disperse allowances. In that process, NSFAS was taking, one of the reasons they were giving was that they want to deal away with the corruption, ghost students, and etc. And yet go and do that type of corruption. It's very worrying. Will we then anticipate that NSFAS will be corrupt-free if at the point where they took a posture to change, to move from, to say they are going to a corrupt-free process, and yet in that process, then you find this type of things happening. It's worrying, to say the least, and especially at the top of, that is a person that we expect that should be ethically clear, ensuring that everything is done on board. Over and across board, the same company picked were exorbitantly charging students exorbitant fees. We have not heard the minister speaking about it in the press briefing when he spoke about the opening of application, about how those fees that students were charged by the same company that were found of wrongdoings, there is no engagement that has reduced the fees. And that is, of course, a point of concern, because you then moved from a student who, we don't mind FNBs, whatever the students that everybody uses. The problem is that you are giving someone who's disadvantaged the money for them to use, and yet you charge them on every other thing that they do exorbitantly more than what a normal bank does. Yet you have realized there's something that is a problem. That's why I'm saying to you, you then realize that the ministry on its own has got a serious problem. You've got a top official, and of course the board acted rightfully. But be that as it may that the board acted rightfully, they still left some of the things done. So it's like they're saying that, okay, sharp, we understood the CEO might have done corruption, but the corruption of the CEO still proceeded, because they did not say, okay, sharp, this must stop with immediate effect, and then what must happen, therefore, we then need to start up on a new process that is corrupt-free, and that is not going to have any effect on students.
Mr. Skosana, where to with these contracts and the service providers, and how are you going to take the steps in this short window of time that you have to make sure that going forward the process of disbursements is free of these allegations of wrongdoing and findings, in fact?
Engagements are ongoing right now between the board as well as the payment aggregation companies. But at the heart of the approach is that the disbursement of allowances should not jeopardize the welfare and the well-being of the student. So there's a very difficult and delicate balance between saying, like Tato is saying, you stop here and now, and then you take all the money, give it back to the institutions, when you also have cases, on the other hand, of some institutions that are owing NSFAS, your 38 million rand, while some of their students are not getting qualifications or academic transcripts at the completion of their degree on the allegation that they are owing 162,000, 56,000. And then you say, what do you do as NSFAS? Take the money, put it in there, pay when you know there could be a negative finding somewhere there, or you deal with the problem as in a considerate manner, like we are doing right now.
So the principle of direct payment seems to be one thing, and obviously you're trying to avoid, this constant paying to one institution and that institution paying to students.
Yes.
But the execution obviously still seems to be a problem. So let's assume the principle is correct.
Correct.
What happens now with those service providers that have been, found to have been in some kind of collusive agreement, with the CEO? Do you keep them? Do you get rid of them? And how do you make sure that if new service providers come in, they're up to the task in such a short period of time?
Look, Sizwe, we are in a constitutional democracy. And I think one of the major tenets of that is due diligence. You and I can feel that, tomorrow, get rid of them, because the finding says so. But there are due processes that must ensue, and that is what the board is engaged with. But of course, in doing so, it is sensitive to the welfare and well-being of the students.
Mr. Masekwa, what do you think should be done? We've got these findings of wrongdoing in terms of how the contracts came about, but we've also got a new academic year, and we need to make sure that disbursements happen.
Yeah, look, our posture is that students must get their allowances in time. Now the academic year is about to start, and you've got institutions that are already planning to go to back to universities like your SMU. They start literally in the next week on the 8th of January. And of course other institutions that have got clinicals and of course, what do they call them? I think in-service trainings, they start quite early. So we want those two allowances to be dispersed at an appropriate time, not to have delays. But of course, what is our point of concern is that when you then give a contract to a company or a service provider, then that you should therefore, at least with the due diligence that Mr. Skosana is speaking about, so that they will have to follow due diligence. But there must be a point that if you then, a company that we appoint as a scheme is found at the wrongdoing, there must be a dire consequence to that, because we therefore cannot say we're doing due diligence while we still are comfortable with that which we found that is wrong. It does not satisfy that you're doing due diligence. On our end, we want students to get the money, but it does not suggest due diligence. If you are saying to me that the company that you have seen, witnessed, has got a report that is at your behest, that is found at the wrongdoing, and you're still comfortable with it, proceeding to still, take, other measures, because you found it at the wrong. That is a discussion that you yourself report that before it went out to the public, to all of us, they sat on it, read it, and realized maybe, or someone maybe amongst them leaked it and realized, no, there's no way that this thing can be contained here. And it's up for the public.
Do you agree with the principle of the direct payment system rather than the payments to universities and then to students?
You see, so our principle is one, is that students must get what is due to them. However, best students must never be compromised. It is our view, you know, that they will come an argument around ghost students. There comes an argument around the direct payment delay. For about 4 months in the previous academic year, on the day of disbursements, the service providers of the direct payment delayed the whole country. You know, it disturbs SRCs because students look at SRCs as the most useless thing because they're all waiting for some companies that must pay. Some of these people don't even pitch up to campuses. So you see, there was a problem with that particular direct payment, which was purported to make the lives of students very simple and simpler in institutions. But then when you realize the implementation part of it was not as smooth as operating as it was supposed to be, because on the day that money is supposed to get in, people are waiting for Ingenile. It does not enter, and it causes a whole disturbances in the whole sector, because you can't even go to your own financial aid, because they will also tell you, no, this is not our responsibility. The responsibilities with Co-Invest, Izaga, and all those other companies that were appointed. When you call all of them, some of them don't respond to students. Their call centers will not respond at all. When students will try to onboard on the system, it will still give them problem. So it's really a problem. But for us, our principle is that we want students to receive their money on the day that they are supposed to receive them without any delays.
Let's go to a break and we'll come back after this with the way forward, the solution, so that we can ensure that this year we avoid the perennial upheaval that often happens in our academic institutions around students receiving the funds due to them. Stick with us. Welcome back to Unfiltered. We're talking the funding of higher education in South Africa and trying to avoid upheavals on our campuses related to students actually receiving the money that is due to them from NSFAS. Mr. Skosana, there's a deeper question here about the policy position. Of course, there's been a major change in the last 5 years or so towards a progressively more free education model. But there's a view as well that, you know what, let's just make it free for everyone. Okay, yes, some privileged students will get a nice tax break or whatever you call it, but you can avoid all the administrative problems of checking the finances of all these different students. What do you think about just making the student free for everyone to save you the headaches of all of these checks?
Just put the money. Sizwe, I just want to share something, with you that appeals to my heart, even when things get really difficult about the funding issue. 68 years ago, that was 1955, when the people of this country had the opportunity to express their aspirations, on education and culture. There's something that they said, doors of education and culture shall be opened. But here's a liner or two that I often regurgitate or repeat. It said, education shall be free, compulsory, universal, and equal for all children. And then there's a line that it adds to say that the aim of education shall be to teach the youth of this country to respect their people and their culture, to honor human brotherhood, liberty, and peace. And when that did not seem to happen in 1976, I don't have to repeat what happened. When in 1986, they attempted to smuggle, well, when I say they, I mean the white government, to smuggle inferior education. I don't have to explain what happened. In my generation, in 1990, we fought against three things: academic and financial exclusion, well, undergirded by lack of accommodation. And of course, there was a big lull once the new government, from a policy stance, came up in 1991 with NSFAS, which was part bursary, part loan. And then after that long period of a lull until around 2012, 2016, then the student movement Fees Must Fall came about, which is what we are now dealing with. So the perspective that we tend to take I guess, as NSFAS and as people employed there, is that we are answering the clarion call which was made by people 68 years ago in the Freedom Charter to say education shall be free, compulsory, universal, and equal. So hence, in the last 5 years, you have seen a move from a part bursary, part loan to a full bursary where everything is catered for, right from tuition, accommodation, and living, allowances. Obviously, that comes with a huge responsibility on the entity itself as a Schedule 3 entity of higher education. And how does that responsibility come about? It comes about as a policy shift on the part of government, where you find that at DBE level, you've got huge numbers of people now going through to post-matric training, because you've got feeding schemes at high schools, you've got fee-free education there,
right.
And then the student population at tertiary level has obviously beyond.
Where are
and
we
now
now, around 1.2 million or so?
1.1 million that we are funding.
Sure.
From a fund of 21.4 million when it started to almost 48 billion today. So what I think I need to highlight is that when NSFAS moved from administration to where it is now, there was no proper prediction of how quickly, these student populations would grow, which depended on us. So
right.
for a time, NSFAS operated with a very skinny and skeletal sort of management. But right now, the board, as well, with the support of ministry, is beefing up, the scheme to live up to TATO's expectation.
Right, and we will come to that as well in terms of what needs to be done going forward.
Oh, yeah.
But on this question of the policy, Mr. Masekwa, what do you think? Do you think that this means-tested approach, which on the one hand is just in that the most deserving students get the money, is the right way to go? Or do you think it would just be procedurally easier to widen the net to everyone, and then you don't have these checks, these constant checks that have to be done?
Honestly, it will be easier. It will be very easy to just bring free education for all. There will be no need for this up and downs that we all go through every year. There will be no need for an anticipated, I'm not sangomatic, that students are going to strike in the next few weeks because of NSFAS at the center of all of this. But what I'm simply saying is that
I think we must add the word sangomatic to the
dictionary. No? We must add the word sangomatic to the dictionary. It simply means, you prophet, you know what might happen in the future. But literally, I'm not sangom. It will be peaceful because the way it is, now there is quite a lot of uncertainty. And of course, a lot of anticipated problems for the academic year as it stands. So if they scrap all of this, many submission of this, submission of that, you are doing wrong there. Though you think you can rob the system, you don't think you can rob the system. Everybody goes to universities. We all know that maybe there will be food coming on this particular day, or maybe all canteens cater for all students. We know toiletries will be served at universities, or whatever the case may be. But you scrape all of these things, we will be knowing we'll be going to universities to study, go back home, buy sofas, make our parents and relatives proud, and then all of us will be progressive like everyone.
One of the problems, of course, is the cost implications of that, because you would have more students under the scheme. Do you think that the budget, which is being cut in all 10%. Kinds of places, would permit for this wider scheme? Maybe what must happen is that Treasury must just focus highly. You see, it says that if you invest in the youth, you invest in the future of the country. Maybe that must be the posture that the government must take, to invest literally in the youth and fund. Just because you see at high school, primary, everybody goes. It makes the country more
educated to take educated decisions, because that's what we want. We want the country to start having intellectual debates around everything that matters in the world. But how would you then have the country having intellectual debates in the world if you then you channel gates to people? You know, when you channel gates to people, you then, you know, dismantle that approach of having the whole country being made aware of every discussion that is at the topic, at a point of another.
Mr. Skosana, do you think there's scope to expand, because you'd also probably get savings in the amount of administration you'd have to do. Do you think it's feasible to just say it's free for everyone? Maybe there's an opt-out rather than an opt-in, and we simplify the system like that?
No, I do not see it the way Tato sees it on that score. I think you and I have tussled around, you know, the costs of education, basically the sector that sells knowledge, you know, worldwide, where I came up with a figure that you kind of disputed. It's at something like $4 trillion on US dollars worldwide. But I'm saying the government has taken a posture to say that with the current tax base, it cannot fund everybody's education, especially post, high school. And therefore it said, let's target the poor and the working class. It chose that. So at this point, that is the policy according to which funding happens. But of course, the government has also taken a step further. I'm not at liberty to talk about that. I guess the ministry can talk to it directly. But I did, I was at a press briefing yesterday when Professor Nzimande spoke about the comprehensive student funding model that is being navigated through Parliament. I don't know what is the contents of that comprehensive scheme yet, or whether it's going to be administered by NSFAS or some other structure, but it seeks to address the missing middle. People that would earn less, or rather more than 350, but still not be in a position to pay. And I think you would agree with me that the whole student movement, Fees Must Fall, was actually instigated by the fact that the fees just went through the roof for everybody, the working class, the property class, or whatever, for everybody, which is why it happened that way. So I am of the view that even if you were getting like R1 million per annum, you would still not be able to pay for your BCom degree at this prestigious university, especially if you have more than one child. Yeah. So completely free, I would say you would not really.
But there's scope
a permutation of part bursary, part loan for a particular segment of the society, I think that is what would work. We went through that system where we had to pay back the NSFAS loan. I went through that. But the Tato is not expected to pay back the loan. There's only one obligation. We say to Tato, we give you everything else to go through your education program, but stay and remain and stay in South Africa for 3 years, or for the duration or that you are funded for. That's the only requirement.
Right, and
no payback. So the
let's leave it at that.
The pot is not being replenished.
Indeed.
And the budgets are getting cut.
Well, our budgeted time has run out as well. But Mr. Skosana and Mr. Masekwa, thank you so much for joining us on Unfiltered this evening.
Thank you, sir.
And this evening we've explored whether the funding crisis, which has been ameliorated to some extent through rolling out free education to more students, but has also been hampered by administrative challenges in the actual payment system to those students. Can we fix that so that not only more students benefit, but they get their money when it is due to them? If we don't, I don't mean to be sangomatic, but we will continue to see upheavals on our campuses. Thank you for joining us on Unfiltered, and have a good evening.